President of Champlain College, Dr. David Finney, Mr. Foster, Governor Douglas, and also Dorothy, his wife, Provost and Chief Academic Officer, Dr. Robin Adamson, members of the Champlain College Board of Trustees, Faculty Presenter Anne Demal, and Madame Powell, dear professors, graduates, members and friends and family. Mon épouse Michelle et moi sommes très honorés de l'hommage que vous nous rendez aujourd'hui. It is an honor for me today to receive an honorary degree from Champlain College. I sincerely thank the college president and trustees for this privilege, especially for the pleasure and for the happiness of sharing this very important moment with my friend Jim Douglas. You may have noticed there's much convergence already in the relationship between Quebec, Vermont, and this institution, since this institution shares a very powerful symbol for Quebec, the name of Champlain. Samuel de Champlain founded the Quebec City in 1608, more than 400 years ago, thus laying the foundation to the presence of a Francophone nation within North America and the foundation of Canada itself. Of course, he then went on to Lake Champlain looking for a cottage. And so we share in this respect. And another thing I noticed very recently in which we share, I saw a news report that Burlington had been found to be the city in the United States with the most happiest population. Well, I have very good news for you. I represent the constituency of Sherbrooke, where I was born and raised, and I've represented the constituency of Sherbrooke federally and in the National Assembly of Quebec for the last 27 years. And very recently, Statistic Canada declared that Sherbrooke was the happiest place in Canada. We are made for each other. Jim and I have built an exceptional relationship, and I'm touched by the fact that through this homage, Champlain College has chosen to underline our work in developing bonds between Quebec and Vermont. I had the pleasure in December of 2003 of welcoming Jim for the first time officially in Quebec. We realized immediately that Quebec and Vermont were on the verge and could be on the verge of a new era of joint cooperation. In fact, we decided we would have a new core curriculum. And the following years, we set out to prove each other right. Our relations have flourished as never before. Jim's leadership and impressive knowledge of Quebec paved the way to what I would like to call a golden age in the relationship between Quebec and Vermont. In recognition of his exceptional leadership, Jim Douglas was appointed an officer of l'Ordre National du Québec in March of 2010, an honor that has never before been bestowed on an elected American official. And the fact is, it has never again since been bestowed to any elected American official. He is the only one. Over the years, we worked together to develop, promote renewable energy, to protect water quality in Lake Memphremagog, Lake Champlain, and Missisquoi Bay, to gain recognition for the role played by federated states, or what is more commonly known as subnational states, in combating climate change. We worked together to reconcile border security imperatives with the free flow of goods and people, and develop the Montreal-Boston Rail Corridor, cutting across the state of Vermont. We also celebrated our shared history in 2008 and 2009 by marking the 400th anniversary of the founding of Quebec City and Samuel de Champlain's exploration of the lake that now bears his name and this exceptional institution. The City of Burlington and Champlain College, of course, were closely involved in the 2009 festivities. And on top of all of this, we launched a new cooperation in the field of agriculture, joined forces to advance multilateral organizations such as the Conference of New England Governors and Eastern Canadian Premiers that Jim Douglas chaired twice over his tenure. The legacy constitutes the base for future relations between Quebec and Vermont. And in February of this year, Governor Champlain acknowledged this by inviting his former political rival and past Lieutenant Governor Brian Doobie to accompany him on his first official visit to Quebec. There's a great lesson in this. My colleagues and I were very highly impressed by this gesture that I hope will inspire others. This was a very noble gesture, highlighted the scope of relations between Quebec and Vermont and illustrated the commitment that he wanted to demonstrate to keep up his momentum, but it was also a salute to his predecessor. Quebec and Vermont are interdependent. Developing cooperation is not only a good thing for our respective populations, we believe it is essential to our common future. We have much more than a border in common. We share history, ideals, and we share values. Close to 40% of Vermonters have French-Canadian roots. Our communities pull together and help each other out. We have learned more in the last few days than ever before that our lakes are part of the same watershed. There are now 3,000 houses that are flooded in southern Quebec. 1,000 people have been displaced. And if there's one reason for me to be here today, it's to simply say, please stop sending the water. Our economies are intertwined, and more often than not, we find ourselves tackling similar problems and the same challenges. All of this means that Quebec and Vermont have shared aspirations. It also means that in a period of changing Canada-US relations, Quebec and Vermont are trendsetters in this respective relationship between Canada and the United States. Relations between Canada and the United States have evolved considerably over the last 20 years. Since the signing of the Canada-US Free Trade Agreement, which was the issue of the 1988 federal election campaign, of which I was part. It was a referendum in Canada on whether or not Canada and the United States would sign a trade agreement that would change our lives. And it was the people of Quebec, by the way. It had not been for the political support of your neighbors in Quebec, this trade agreement would have never happened. That's how significant and how committed we are in our relationship with our neighbors to the south. Since the signing of this trade agreement, followed a few years later by NAFTA to include Mexico, our economies have become highly, highly integrated. Indeed, economic trade between our two countries is among the most extensive in the world. The tragic events of September 11th, 2001 have also shaped our relationship. Up until 9/11, the number one issue of our countries between us had always been trade. Since then, security has come to the forefront. A past ambassador of the United States in Canada, a former governor of the state of Massachusetts, Paul Cellucci, summed it up during his tenure by saying that from now on, in the relationship between Canada and the United States, security trumps trade. Fluctuations also in the values of our respective dollars have changed our relationship. Growing energy needs and climate change has also had an impact. With this in mind, Canada pays close attention to developments south of the border. Despite the fact that Canada is the world's second largest country in terms of landmass, our domestic market is very different, on a different scale from those in the US or China. This asymmetry means that Canada and the United States attach different importance to our relations. Canada's interest is very pronounced. We depend more on the United States than you do on us. The same applies to Quebec, where 70% of our international exports are destined for the United States. And as our economies grow closer, provinces and states have become increasingly active and play a tangible role in developing Canada-US relations. Quebec and Vermont haven't just followed the pack, we have set the pace. In the wake of the inclusion of the Buy America Clause and the recovery plan launched in 2009 by the Obama administration, Quebec and Vermont spoke out clearly and forcefully against protectionism. In February 2010, we joined with the other Canadian provinces and territories and many U.S. states to support the signing of a Canada-U.S. agreement on government procurement. The provinces and states played a key role during these negotiations. And for partners like Quebec and Vermont, with over $3 billion in trade per year, the agreement has been very important. Beyond free trade, Quebec and Vermont have contributed to the efforts devoted by federated states to combating climate change and encouraging sustainable development through a number of regional forums. Quebec and Vermont have the smallest footprint in their respective countries, and we are doing all we can to keep it this way. In August 2010, this determination to reduce greenhouse gas emissions led Vermont and Quebec to sign a 26-year, 225-megawatt supply contract to recognize hydroelectricity also as a form of renewable energy, regardless of production capacity. Vermont's official recognition of large-scale hydro as clean energy is a first in the United States. Quebec and Vermont also teamed together to convince other American states of the advantages of treating all forms of hydroelectricity on an equal footing. Jim Douglas even raised this issue with President Obama. Also, thanks to Jim, when he chaired the National Governors Association, for the first time ever, there was a meeting organized between Canadian premiers and American governors in February of 2010 in Washington. As far as security is concerned, Quebec and Vermont were among the first jurisdictions to offer in 2009 the enhanced driver's license that serves as an alternative to the passport in order to meet the new requirements of Homeland Security. On top of all of this, we're working together to bring the Vermonter train back to Montreal. Ladies and gentlemen, I take great pride in the work that I've been able to do in political life, which has been a passion of mine. One of the great secrets of political life is the people you meet along the way, the extraordinary people you meet along the way. I want to close today on the same theme as Dr. Finney and say to all of you that you have been exceptional and great neighbors. You have been great friends. Jim Douglas has been a great leader, and you have been great people. Congratulations on what you've accomplished, and please continue along this path. Thank you.